Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're going to do another episode of how to mix doom metal, specifically with Does It Doom. I edit Steve's videos over on Does It Doom, and we recently did the song Lifer from Down, so I want to show you step by step exactly what I did to get the result that you see in the video over on Steve's channel. So let's go ahead and jump into the computer. Again, we're in Premiere. I use Premiere as both a video editor and essentially a DAW. I mix and edit all the audio inside Premiere. I record it sometimes in GarageBand, which let's go ahead and jump over to GarageBand because Steve sent me the song over and I imported all the MIDI files. This is one of the rare occasions where I get drums on the MIDI files whenever he sends them over. So we have all the instruments. So I took the drums inside GarageBand, I exported them, and I brought them into Premiere, where I do my audio editing. So I wanted to show this one because this one's kind of a little bit more intensive, I guess. It's not really that difficult, and it's not really, some special thing that I did. I just kind of had to EQ the guitars to sound more like the record. So let's go ahead and hear the intro guitar. So Steve sent me 2 takes of 2 different guitars. So I have one hard pan left and one hard pan right, and then the other 2 are kind of in the middle a little bit. So right there you hear, over here on track, we've got Pepper 1 and Pepper 2. You can see I've got the main track panned at like 20% right. The double track sits a little bit lower in the mix, and it's panned about 80% to the left. Another thing I did was I started the song out with a little less volume on those intro clips. So if we zoom in here, you can see I reduced the gain by about 4 decibels. And that is these clips right here. And to give that real impact, what I did was I bumped the volume up on the kind of where it turns around and all the guitars come in. So that was kind of the first thing. I just wanted to give like the full band more of a punch, because like the guitar starting out, it sounds good, but then when everything kicks in, it's even more aggressive. So let's go ahead and hear just the guitars in that section. So the intro, and then all the guitars are going to come in. And you can see over here, Kirk 1 and Kirk 2 are pretty much identical panning wise, but like opposite of Pepper 1 and 2. The main Kirk track is going to be 20% to the left. The double is going to be 80% to the right, and it's going to sit a little bit lower in volume, just to give kind of a wider guitar wall, I guess. So that brings us to kind of how I shaped the EQ of the guitars. Now, Steve used I think he used a Baghdad into the Carvin power amp that you see behind him in the video. And this gives like an incredibly mid-focused sound. And here is that guitar by itself without any EQ. Sounds good, but it's very mid-range focused and very mid-range present. And now, I honestly had never really listened to Down, so I got to listen to this song for the first time, and I listened to it a few times, and the big thing that I took away from the mix was that the guitars are fairly mid-scooped, so that's kind of the opposite of the tracks that I got. So I started to carve out some mid-range in the EQ to kind of get me closer to the recording sound. And this is the EQ I came up with. We have a lot of cutting at 800 hertz, and then we're boosting around 4800. So let's go ahead and hear the guitar without the EQ, and then I'm going to kick the EQ in. You can hear that it's pretty drastic, honestly, and usually I don't really have to do this, and I didn't really have to do this, but the main thing that I took away from listening to the song is the guitars are fairly scooped, and it's not a whole bunch of mid-range. So I wanted to kind of emulate that in the track here. And I did the same exact thing on the double of this guitar. So let's jump over and hear that. This is going to be the one sitting to the left. It's a little bit quieter, and you can see I did almost the same thing. I bumped 3 decibels at like 6,700. The other one was like 48, I think. And then this one is cut at 567. So it's a little bit, the frequencies are differing a little bit, but let's hear how it sounds. This is without. So you can hear that it's pretty drastic. Let's go ahead and hear both of the guitars, or both of those tracks, with no EQ and then with EQ. So this is the Pepper track with no EQ. Pretty drastic. Let's go ahead and jump over to the Kirk guitar. I'm not going to go through exact numbers. I did pretty much the same thing. You can see dumped a lot of mid-range, boosted the high end a little bit on both of these. Yeah, so let's go ahead and turn these EQs off and just listen to the Kirk double track right here. So it's a little bit kind of heavier sounding when put in isolation. And that's all I did to the guitars EQ wise. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I like to send my guitars to a bus, or a submix track as they call it in Premiere. And essentially what that does is you take the output of those guitar tracks. You can see right here where it says guitar bus. I'm sending the output into a single track. So then I can have this guitar bus track right here, and I can manipulate the volume all at once. So if I want to just take out the guitars, I can. Easy as that. I really like doing that because you can also kind of compress and affect the guitars all at once, which is what I did. Multi-band compressor, you know it's my favorite. I put the threshold a little bit lower. We're not really doing much compression on the compressor part right here. So let's go ahead and hear the guitars without the compressor and then kick the compressor on. So it kind of makes everything a little bit fuller, kind of brings all the frequencies more into the forefront. And again, it really works to my ears. So that's why I like using it. Now we have the bass guitar, which is pretty much the same as I always do. It's just I put the MIDI info in GarageBand and then I export the bass track as its own track. So let's go ahead and hear that. So I did do some EQ on this one. Okay, I just shelved some of the high end because I didn't want it to get like too bright. It's pretty subtle, but then after that I compressed it. Again, multi-band compressor. Let's hear it without the multi-band compressor and then with the multi-band compressor. Kind of just brings everything. It kind of tames the pick attack a little bit, or compresses it down to meet the note resonance. So I put that in there, and I don't mix it super high because I don't want it to be obviously MIDI bass. And then we're going to go on to the drums. Now the drums, I did have to do a little bit more processing than I normally do. So again, if you watched any of the other ones, you know that I use Easy Drummer 3, which is a great program. And typically what I do is I export the MIDI files into WAV files and then bring them into Premiere. And I know that's not exactly how even TuneTrack designed it to be used, because there's a whole like sequencer in there that you can build songs, and that's just not the workflow that I use for this. So let's go ahead and hear just the drums here. Again, I split them into drums and cymbals. So this is just the drum track. And then here's just the cymbal track. And then here's both of them. So what I did here on the drums, I multi-band compressed them. Again, just using the limiter pretty much. So let's go ahead and hear just the drum track by itself without compression, and then I'll kick the compressor on. Fairly subtle when you just listen to it by itself. Let's go over to the cymbal track. What did I do here? Okay, the cymbal track, I kind of tried to mitigate the bleed by turning the low end off, essentially. I shelved the low end at 250 hertz, and then I decreased the high end to kind of get the shrillness out of the cymbals. And after that, I multi-band compressed it, again, using the limiter mostly just to kind of make everything a little bit more cohesive. So let's go ahead and turn those effects off. First, I'll turn on the EQ, and then I'll turn on the compression. So here's with nothing. You can hear there's kind of low end there, but when I turn the EQ on, it's going to go away. Okay, now we're going to go with the compression. Kind of just brings the volume up a little bit, honestly. It kind of makes the snare pop out a little bit, but it's just kind of increasing the volume. The last thing that I did with the drum tracks is send them to a parallel channel to do even more affecting and kind of a more intense effect that brings the drum kit together. It probably doesn't make sense what I'm saying, so let's just jump in here. If you see the drums para track right here, or the effect kind of, so down here, this little 00 dB meter right here, that's how much signal I'm sending to the parallel track. You can see over here it's -20 because the cymbals can really get overwhelming pretty quick, so I tend to not send as much cymbals to the drum parallel track. And then over here on the drum parallel track, which is this one right here, we have a compressor. So the compression is on the more intense side. I'm going to turn the compressor off on the parallel track, and then we're going to start with the drums, and then I'm going to turn it on. kind of brings the room out a lot because I'm compressing it so much that all those artifacts in the background are getting amplified. And then after that, I use the Decapitator plugin, which is from Sound Toys, and it's like it's a paid plugin, so it's not a free one, but it's really good. It's a saturation plugin, so it mimics some tape machines, and you get a parallel compression or parallel signal blend right here. You can dial in the dry amount, the wet amount, output. You can kind of shape your tone as well. And so this is going to give a little bit of saturation to the signal. Let's go ahead and hear the drums again with everything on except for the Decapitator, which is the last in the chain, and then I'll turn it on. And you can see there's this cool meter right here that the needle's not really moving a whole bunch, so it's doing pretty subtle work there. But that's the extent of the processing that I did on the individual tracks. And then, of course, I send those all to the master, and then multi-band compressor with the master, and then I hard limit the master. So that brings everything up to a point where it's very loud and very present to anyone listening. So let's go ahead and hear a section of the song with no effects at all, just completely raw, and then I'll turn everything on. So we'll hear it with no effects and then all the effects. So I hope you enjoyed this look at mixing doom metal with Steve over at Does It Doom. We did Down Lifer, and again, I hope you took something away from this. I hope it gave you some ideas, and if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. Again, I hope you liked the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one.